The slap echoed through Rosie's diner at exactly 7:43 on a Saturday morning. Margaret Collins had been sitting at table number 7 for 47 minutes, the same table where James had proposed to her 52 years ago, the same table where they had celebrated every anniversary until death separated them exactly 1 year ago today. She ordered 2 plates of pancakes, one for herself and one placed across the empty seat. A ritual of remembrance that the waitstaff had come to understand without explanation. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a napkin. The early tremors of Parkinson's disease, a secret she had kept from everyone, including her son. Her elbow brushed the glass of orange juice. The glass tipped. Orange liquid splashed across the Italian leather shoes of the man at the next table. Brad Thompson, 47 years old, real estate developer, net worth approximately $43 million, looked down at his ruined $2,800 shoes. His face transformed from irritation to rage in the span of a single heartbeat. What the hell? Margaret's voice came out fragile, apologetic. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. She never finished the sentence. Brad grabbed the collar of her faded floral dress, yanked her to her feet. She weighed barely 98 pounds, light as autumn leaves, and she rose from her chair like a puppet on strings. Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost? His voice thundered through the quiet diner. More than your entire pension for a year, you pathetic old hag. The slap came not with an open palm, but with the back of his hand. His wedding ring, a thick band of white gold, caught her across the cheekbone. Margaret's head snapped to the side. Her glasses flew off her face and skittered across the tile floor. Her dentures came loose from the impact, falling from her mouth and rolling beneath a nearby chair. She crumpled to her knees, her head striking the edge of the table on the way down. Blood began to seep from the corner of her mouth, dripping onto the white tile floor in small crimson circles. Brad stood over her, chest heaving, face still contorted with fury. He grabbed a handful of napkins from the dispenser, wiped his shoes with exaggerated disgust, then threw the soiled napkins at her face. Clean my shoes properly, then get out of here. You worthless piece of trash. 23 people sat in Rosie's diner that morning. 23 people watched a 74-year-old woman get struck across the face. 23 people saw her fall to her knees, saw her dentures roll across the floor, saw blood drip from her split lip. Not one person stood up. Not one person spoke. The cook peered through the kitchen window, then retreated back to his grill. A mother in the corner booth covered her young daughter's eyes, but did not move from her seat. An elderly man, a veteran who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, gripped his wife's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. But he remained frozen in place. The owner of the diner, a heavy-set man named Rosie Jr., who had inherited the establishment from his father, approached Margaret with nervous steps. "Ma'am," he whispered, leaning close to her ear. "Maybe you should leave. I don't want any more trouble." Margaret knelt on the cold tile floor, her hands shaking violently as she searched for her dentures. Her fingers found them beneath the leg of a chair, and she clutched them in her palm like something precious. Blood continued to drip from her lip, each drop marking the white floor. She looked up at Brad Thompson, and in that moment, something strange passed across her face. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something far more complex. Something that looked almost like recognition, like the shattering of hope. like the confirmation of a terrible suspicion held for 45 years. She looked into his cold blue eyes, searching for something. Whatever she found there made her face crumple with a grief far deeper than physical pain. Brad did not notice. He had already turned away, was already barking at the waitress for more napkins, was already complaining loudly about the incompetence of the elderly, about how they should be kept in homes where they could not bother productive members of society. Behind the counter, a 19-year-old waitress named Emily stood frozen, a serving tray trembling in her hands. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed on Margaret with an expression of horror and something else, something that looked like personal anguish. She did not rush to help the old woman. Instead, she did something else entirely. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out her phone, and with shaking fingers, pressed record. Margaret finally rose to her feet, moving slowly, painfully. She did not look at anyone. She tucked her dentures into her pocket, left her broken glasses on the floor, and walked toward the back exit of the diner. The exit that led to the alley where the dumpster stood. The door closed behind her with a soft click. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. In the bathroom of a gas station, locked in a stall that smelled of industrial cleaner, Margaret Collins finally allowed herself to cry. But even then, even through the sobs that shook her fragile frame, she did not cry for herself. She cried for the 3-year-old boy with blue eyes she had held in her arms 45 years ago. The boy she had wanted to save. The boy who had just broken her heart for the 2nd time. Back at Rosie's diner, Emily the waitress was still recording. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her jaw was set with determination. She captured Brad Thompson demanding a free meal for his troubles. Captured him laughing with the friend who had just arrived. Captured him making jokes about senile old bags who should learn their place. She captured everything. And when her shift ended 4 hours later, she uploaded the video with a caption that would change everything. She typed the words carefully, her fingers steady now with purpose. She knew exactly what she was doing. After all, Margaret Collins was her grandmother's savior, the woman who had pulled her family out of poverty 2 generations ago. And Emily had just watched her get slapped in the face by a man who had no idea what storm he had just unleashed. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Now let's continue with the story. 12 hours after the slap, Brad Thompson sat in his home office with his feet propped on a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's annual salary. The West Lake Hills mansion sprawled around him in carefully curated luxury. Every piece of furniture selected by an interior designer who charged $500 an hour. He was laughing. "You should have seen her face," he told Jennifer, his wife of 15 years, former beauty queen of UT Austin. Still beautiful at 42, but growing tired around the eyes. Shaking like a leaf. Probably never seen a pair of shoes worth more than her monthly Social Security check. Jennifer stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You hit an old woman in public. Tapped her, taught her some manners." Brad waved dismissively. "Anyway, I've got the Morrison Group meeting this afternoon. $47 million deal. After this closes, we're flying to the Maldives next week." His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then began buzzing continuously, a relentless vibration that would not stop. Brad glanced at the screen with irritation. 847 text messages. 2,340 missed calls. His email inbox showed a number he had never seen before, climbing higher with each passing second. His personal phone rang, his business phone rang, his wife's phone rang, all at once. A symphony of electronic screaming. Brad answered his personal line. "What? Mr. Thompson? This is Patricia Vance from CNN. We'd like your comment on the video currently trending #1 nationwide showing you assaulting an elderly woman in..." He hung up. The phone rang again, immediately. "Mr. Thompson, Fox News here. Can you confirm that the woman in the viral video is Margaret Collins, mother of tech billionaire Daniel Collins?" The blood drained from Brad's face so quickly he felt dizzy. He opened Twitter with fumbling fingers. The video filled his screen. 47 million views, 12 million shares, 8 million comments. The hashtag Justice for Margaret dominated every trending list in the country. He watched himself grab an old woman by her collar, watched himself slap her across the face, watched her dentures fall to the floor, watched himself throw napkins at her bleeding face and call her worthless trash. The caption beneath the video read, "Real estate developer Brad Thompson assaults 74-year-old Margaret Collins at Rosie's Diner. Austin TX. Mrs. Collins is the mother of Daniel Collins, billionaire founder of Cloudverse Technologies. For 40 years, she has quietly provided scholarships to over 800 underprivileged students across Texas, including current federal judges, CEOs, and civic leaders. She was visiting the diner on the 1-year anniversary of her husband's death." Brad's hands began to shake. He Googled Daniel Collins' net worth. $4.7 billion. The room seemed to tilt around him. His business phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison Group's CEO. "Michael," Brad answered, forcing his voice to stay steady. "We're still on for this afternoon, right? The 47 million. Brad." Michael Torres's voice was cold as Arctic ice. "I'm calling to inform you that the deal is canceled, effective immediately." "What, Michael? We've been working on this for 18 months. We're 3 signatures away from, I know Margaret Collins." The words fell like stones into still water. "When I was 12 years old," Michael continued, "I was living on the streets, begging for change on Congress Avenue. No family, no hope, no future. Margaret Collins found me. She didn't give me money to buy food. She gave me money to buy books. For 7 years. She supported me. She believed in me when I had nothing. She's the reason I graduated from UT Austin. She's the reason I built my company. She's the reason I'm alive." Brad opened his mouth, but no words came. "I do not do business with men who assault the woman who saved my life. Goodbye, Brad." The line went dead. Before Brad could process what had happened, his phone rang again. First Texas Bank, his primary lender. "Mr. Thompson, this is Robert Hayes from the credit department. I'm calling to inform you that all lines of credit associated with Thompson Real Estate have been frozen pending review." "Frozen on what grounds?" "Section 7.3 of your lending agreement. The morality clause regarding conduct detrimental to the bank's reputation. Additionally, your $12 million loan is being called due within 72 hours per the accelerated repayment clause." 72 hours, the original term was 90 days. The clause allows for accelerated collection in cases of severe reputational damage. This qualifies. You have until Tuesday morning. Mr. Thompson, good day. 72 hours. Brad stared at his phone as the screen went dark. 72 hours to come up with $12 million. His assets were tied up in properties that couldn't be liquidated quickly. His credit was frozen. His biggest deal had just evaporated. The phone rang again. An unknown number. Brad Thompson. Who is this? Travis County District Attorney's Office. We've received the viral video as well as a formal complaint regarding aggravated assault on an elderly person. This is a felony in the state of Texas. You have 48 hours to surrender yourself voluntarily. If you fail to appear, we will issue a warrant for your arrest. 48 hours. The numbers began stacking in Brad's mind like a countdown to destruction. 72 hours until financial ruin. 48 hours until arrest. And somewhere out there, 847 people who apparently owed their lives to the woman he had slapped were waking up to the news of what he had done. His email pinged. A message from his attorney. Unable to represent you in this matter. Conflict of interest. My daughter's Stanford scholarship was funded by the Collins Family Foundation. I recommend seeking alternative counsel immediately. Brad threw his phone across the room. Jennifer appeared in the doorway again, her face ashen. Brad, my phone is exploding. My mother is calling. My friends are calling. There are news vans pulling up outside the gate. Through the window, Brad could see the lights. 3, 4, 5 news trucks lining the private road leading to his mansion. His phone, despite its journey across the room, continued to buzz against the hardwood floor. He walked over and picked it up with trembling hands. Another email, then another, then a cascade. His partners, his investors, his clients, all of them saying the same thing. We are terminating our relationship with Thompson Real Estate effective immediately. We cannot be associated with this incident. We will not be commenting publicly, but wish you the best in resolving this matter. 47 emails in the span of 30 minutes. 47 relationships. Some built over decades, severed with the clinical precision of a surgical strike. But something about the emails nagged at Brad. He scrolled through them, noting the timestamps. They had all been sent within a 2-hour window, almost as if they had been coordinated. He Googled Margaret Collins. The search results painted a picture that made his stomach clench. For 40 years, Margaret Collins had quietly operated what many called the most effective private scholarship program in Texas history. No foundation, no press releases, no public recognition, just plain white envelopes containing checks for $5,000 to $50,000. Always accompanied by a handwritten note: work hard, be kind, help others someday. 847 recipients over 4 decades. The list of names read like a who's who of Texas power. Patricia Webb, federal judge for the Western District of Texas. Michael Torres, CEO of Morrison Group. Thomas Grant Jr., chief of police for the city of Austin. Amanda Price, forensic accountant, currently employed at Thompson Real Estate. Brad stopped scrolling. Amanda Price, his chief accountant. He pulled up his IRS correspondence with shaking hands. There it was. A notification he had missed in the chaos. Dear Mr. Thompson, this letter is to inform you that the Internal Revenue Service has received an anonymous complaint regarding potential tax fraud connected to Thompson Real Estate, LLC. A formal investigation will commence within 48 hours. The complaint had been filed that morning. The digital signature of the forwarding agent showed it had been processed by someone inside his own company. Brad called Amanda's number. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Thompson, I was wondering when you'd call. Amanda, what the hell did you do? I resigned this morning, effective immediately. And yes, I filed the complaint. You'll never work in accounting again. I'll destroy you. No, Mr. Thompson, you won't. Amanda's voice was steady, almost peaceful. 20 years ago, I was a single mother working 2 jobs, trying to put myself through accounting school. I couldn't afford tuition. I was going to drop out. Then I got an envelope in the mail. $15,000. No return address. Just a note that said, "Be kind." Brad closed his eyes. I found out yesterday who sent that envelope. Amanda continued. Margaret Collins, the woman whose dentures you knocked out of her mouth. The woman you called worthless trash. The line went silent for a moment. I hope you rot, Mr. Thompson. I really do. She hung up. Brad stood alone in his office, surrounded by symbols of wealth that suddenly felt like the props of a collapsing stage set. 72 hours until the bank took everything. 48 hours until the police came for him. And somewhere in a hospital room across the city, the woman he had slapped was talking to her billionaire son, a son who had just sent a single email to 847 people. An email that contained no instructions, no requests, no demands. Just 3 sentences. My mother was assaulted yesterday. I am not asking anyone to do anything. I just thought you should know. And like dominoes arranged across decades, they were beginning to fall. Brad's phone buzzed one final time. A text from a number he didn't recognize. The message contained only an address, St. David's Medical Center, room 412. Below it, 3 words. She wants to meet. Brad did not sleep that night. He sat in his home office until 3 in the morning, calling every lawyer in his contact list. 17 names. Accumulated over 2 decades of business dealings, men and women who had helped him navigate zoning disputes and contract negotiations and the occasional harassment complaint that needed to disappear quietly. The first 8 cited scheduling conflicts. Their calendars were suddenly, inexplicably full for the foreseeable future. The 9th was Harold Benson, 30 years of experience. The man who had defended a sitting senator against corruption charges and won. Brad, I can't take this case. Harold, I'll pay triple your rate, quadruple. Name your price. It's not about money. Harold's voice carried a weight that Brad had never heard before. Do you know who paid for my daughter's medical school? Do you know who gave me the startup capital for my first office 25 years ago? Brad felt the answer coming before Harold said it. Margaret Collins. She believed in me when I was a nobody working out of a storage unit. I cannot defend the man who struck her. I'm sorry. The line went dead. Numbers 10 through 14 offered variations of the same refusal. Conflicts of interest, personal obligations, prior commitments that could not be broken. Number 15, a young attorney named Rachel Morrison, who had no apparent connection to Margaret Collins, agreed to meet him the following morning. Brad arrived at her office at 8 sharp, wearing his best suit, carrying a briefcase full of documents that he hoped would explain away the video as a momentary lapse. An aberration. A mistake that anyone could make under sufficient stress. Rachel listened to his explanation for approximately 4 minutes. Then she slid a photograph across her desk. It showed a teenage girl in a hospital bed, bald from chemotherapy, smiling weakly at the camera. Standing beside her, holding her hand, was a woman Brad now recognized instantly. Margaret Collins. My sister, Rachel said quietly. Leukemia. We couldn't afford treatment. Our insurance denied coverage. We were preparing to let her die at home when an anonymous donor paid for everything. 18 months of chemotherapy, bone marrow transplant, 5 years of follow-up care, $300,000. She pushed the photograph closer to Brad. My sister is 29 now. She's a pediatric oncologist at MD Anderson. She saves children's lives every day because Margaret Collins saved hers. Rachel stood up. Get out of my office, Mr. Thompson, and don't contact me again. Brad drove back to his mansion in a daze. The news vans had multiplied overnight. He counted 11 vehicles now. Their satellite dishes pointed at the sky like mechanical sunflowers. Reporters shouted questions as his car passed through the gate, their voices blending into an incomprehensible roar of accusation. Inside, Jennifer was packing suitcases. What are you doing? She did not look at him. I watched the video. Brad, I watched it 17 times. I kept thinking there must be some explanation, some context that would make it less horrible than it looked. She zipped a suitcase closed with violent finality. There isn't. You hit a 74-year-old woman because she spilled juice on your shoes. You threw napkins in her face and called her trash in front of everyone while she bled on the floor. Jennifer, I was stressed. The Morrison deal was falling apart. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I lost control for one moment. 1 moment. She finally looked at him, and her eyes held something worse than anger. They held recognition, as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time. I've watched you for 15 years, Brad. Watched you scream at waiters for bringing the wrong wine. Watched you berate assistants until they cried. Watched you treat everyone beneath you like they were dirt on your shoes. She picked up her suitcases. I told myself it was just stress, just ambition, just the price of success. But that video showed me who you really are. And I won't let Lily grow up thinking that's how men are supposed to behave. Where is Lily? Already at my parents' house. Don't call her. Don't text her. My lawyer will be in contact about custody arrangements. Your lawyer, Jennifer. We can work this out. Couples counseling, anger management, whatever you want. Jennifer paused at the door. My lawyer's name is Robert Chen. Maybe you should Google him. She left. Brad Googled Robert Chen, divorce attorney, Austin, Texas. The search results included a profile piece from the Austin American-Statesman dated 3 years ago. The headline read, From homeless teenager to top family law attorney Robert Chen. Credits anonymous donor for changing his life. The article mentioned that Chen had been living on the streets at 16, addicted to drugs, destined for prison or death. A woman had found him behind a grocery store and refused to give up on him. She paid for his rehab. She paid for his education. She checked on him every month for 10 years. The woman's name was never mentioned in the article. But Brad knew. Of course he knew. He threw his laptop across the room. It shattered against the wall, expensive components scattering across the hardwood floor. His phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered anyway. Desperate for any voice that might offer something other than condemnation. Mr. Thompson, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with Austin PD. I'm calling as a courtesy to remind you that you have until tomorrow morning to surrender yourself at the Travis County Courthouse. If you fail to appear, a warrant will be issued. I understand. I'll be there. One more thing. Mr. Thompson, the district attorney has decided to pursue enhanced charges. Aggravated assault of an elderly person is a third-degree felony in Texas. You're facing 2 to 10 years in state prison. 2 to 10 years. The words echoed in Brad's skull like a death sentence. The DA is recommending no bail. Detective Martinez continued. Given the severity of the crime and the public attention, they consider you a flight risk. No bail, that's insane. I have roots in this community. I own property. I'm not going anywhere. That's not my decision. Mr. Thompson, I'm just delivering the message. Have a good day. She hung up. Brad stood in the wreckage of his office, surrounded by the shattered remains of his laptop, and tried to think. He needed a lawyer. But every lawyer in Austin seemed to have some connection to Margaret Collins. He needed money. But his accounts were frozen, and his biggest deal had collapsed. He needed support. But his wife had left him, and his business partners had abandoned him. He pulled out his phone and began searching for lawyers outside of Texas, Dallas, Houston, New York, Los Angeles. He would fly someone in, pay whatever it cost, find someone with no connection to Margaret Collins and her network of grateful beneficiaries. He found a name. Victor Hale. Criminal defense attorney, Los Angeles. No known Texas connections. Famous for defending celebrities in high-profile cases. Brad called the number. Victor answered personally, which Brad took as a good sign. Mr. Thompson, I've seen the video. The whole country has seen the video. I'm willing to take your case. Relief flooded through Brad's chest. Thank you. God. Thank you. I'll pay whatever. My retainer is $1 million. Non-refundable. Wire transfer only. I'll need it within the hour. 1 million. That's robbery. That's the market rate for defending the most hated man in America. Take it or leave it. Brad's accounts were frozen. His credit lines were closed. His assets were locked in properties that couldn't be liquidated overnight. But he had one resource left. His personal safe. He kept cash there for emergencies, not $1 million, but enough to make a partial payment, to secure Victor's services while he figured out how to access more funds. He walked to the master bedroom, to the walk-in closet, to the hidden panel behind his collection of Italian suits. He entered the combination. The safe door swung open. Empty. The cash was gone. $300,000 in emergency funds vanished. A note sat where the money had been, written in Jennifer's handwriting. Consider this in advance on my settlement. Don't bother trying to find it. Robert Chen helped me move it somewhere you'll never reach. Brad stared at the empty safe for a long time. Then he laughed. It was not a sane laugh. He walked back to his office, stepping over the shattered laptop, and poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter that cost more than most people's cars. He drank it in one swallow. Then he poured another. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking Cloudverse CEO Daniel Collins releases statement on mother's assault. Brad opened the article with trembling fingers. The statement was brief. My mother has dedicated her life to helping others. She has asked me not to pursue vengeance against Mr. Thompson. I will honor her wishes. However, I want to make one thing clear. I did not ask anyone to take action against Mr. Thompson. I simply informed the people my mother has helped over the years about what happened. What they choose to do with that information is entirely their own decision. I have no control over 847 individual consciences. Brad read the statement 3 times. Then he began to understand. Daniel Collins hadn't orchestrated anything. He hadn't made phone calls or given orders or coordinated the systematic destruction of Brad's life. He had simply told the truth. And the truth had activated a network that had been building for 4 decades. 847 people, judges, CEOs, police officers, accountants, lawyers, doctors, teachers, journalists, all of them connected by a single thread. All of them owing their success, their careers, their very lives to Margaret Collins. And all of them, in this moment, making independent decisions to repay that debt. Brad wasn't facing a coordinated attack. He was facing something far worse. He was facing an army of individuals, each with their own reasons, each with their own resources, each with their own opportunities to make his life hell. He couldn't fight an organization, but an organization could be negotiated with, could be reasoned with, could be bought off. How do you fight 847 people who owe everything to the woman you slapped? You can't. You simply can't. Brad's phone buzzed again. Another text from that unknown number. The message contained a video file. Brad pressed play. The video showed the interior of a hospital room. Margaret Collins lay in bed, her face bruised, her lips stitched. A man sat beside her, holding her hand. Daniel Collins. They were talking, unaware they were being filmed. Me. Why won't you let me destroy him? Daniel asked. Margaret's voice was weak but clear. Because there are things you don't know about that man. Daniel. Things I've never told anyone. What things? Bradley Thompson isn't just some stranger who lost his temper. She paused, and something that looked like grief crossed her face. He's the reason I started helping students 45 years ago. Daniel looked confused. What do you mean? I mean that man is the reason I became who I am, and I need to see him, face to face, before this goes any further. The video ended. Brad stared at his phone. The unknown number sent one more message. She knows who you are. She's always known. The question is, do you know who she is? Brad felt something cold settle in his stomach. He Googled his own name, searching for records he hadn't looked at in decades. Birth certificate, Bradley James Morrison. Mother deceased. Father unknown. He had changed his name at 18, taking the surname of the last foster family who had shown him any kindness. But before that, before Brad Thompson existed, there had been a 3-year-old boy named Bradley Morrison who had spent time in a place called St. Michael's Children's Home. He searched for St. Michael's. He searched for adoption records from 1982. He found a newspaper clipping from the Austin American-Statesman, dated March 21st, 1982. The headline made his blood turn to ice. Local couple denied adoption of orphaned toddler due to income requirements. The article was brief. A human interest piece buried in the back pages. A young couple, James and Margaret Collins, had applied to adopt a 3-year-old boy from St. Michael's Children's Home. Their application had been denied because their combined income fell $200 short of the minimum requirement. The boy's name was not mentioned in the article, but Brad knew. He had always known. Somewhere in the back of his mind. In the nightmares he refused to examine. In the rage he could never explain. He had been that boy, and Margaret Collins had been the woman who wanted to save him. Brad spent the night researching. He pulled every document he could find about his own past. records he had buried decades ago, files he had paid good money to make disappear, the adoption records from St. Michael's, the foster care placements, the court documents from when he had legally changed his name at 18. Shedding Bradley Morrison like a snake shedding dead skin, by dawn, he had constructed a timeline that made his hands shake. March 1982. James and Margaret Collins apply to adopt 3-year-old Bradley Morrison. Application denied due to insufficient income. They were $200 short. April 1982. Bradley Morrison placed with first foster family. September 1982. Returned to St. Michael's. Reason cited behavioral issues. The pattern repeated 7 times over 12 years. 7 families. 7 returns. 7 failures. In between the placements, there were hospital visits. Broken arm, age 6. Fractured ribs, age 9. Malnutrition, age 11. The medical records told a story that the official documents carefully avoided, but woven through those years of misery. Brad found something else. Anonymous donations to St. Michael's Children's Home. Beginning in 1982 and continuing until the facility closed in 1995. The donations were always modest, a few $100s at a time, but they came every month without fail. Anonymous complaints filed against 2 of his foster families. Complaints that triggered investigations and eventually removed him from abusive homes. An anonymous scholarship fund established in 1995, the same year Brad turned 18 and aged out of the foster system. The fund specifically targeted former foster children attending Texas universities. Brad had received a scholarship from that fund. He had never questioned where the money came from. The morning light found him sitting in his ruined office, surrounded by papers that told the story of a woman who had loved him from the shadows for 45 years, and he had knocked her teeth out over a pair of shoes. His phone rang, a local number he did not recognize. "Mr. Thompson, my name is Robert Hayes. I'm a criminal defense attorney." Brad almost laughed. "Let me guess. Margaret Collins paid for your law school." Silence on the other end. "No, Mr. Thompson. I've never met Margaret Collins. I don't know anyone she's helped. I'm calling because I saw an opportunity." Brad sat up straighter. "What kind of opportunity?" "The kind where a desperate man with significant assets needs representation, and I'm willing to provide it. My fee is reasonable. $500,000, half up front, half upon resolution of the case. My assets are frozen. I'm aware. I'm also aware that you own property that can be leveraged. Your vacation home in Galveston, the commercial lot on Congress Avenue. There are ways to access capital even when banks aren't cooperating." For the first time in 36 hours, Brad felt something like hope. "Why would you help me? Everyone in this city seems to have some connection to that woman." Because not everyone in this city worships at the altar of Margaret Collins. Some of us find the whole situation distasteful. A mob mentality, driven by viral outrage, destroying a man's life over a momentary loss of control. Robert Hayes paused. "Don't misunderstand me. What you did was wrong. But the punishment should fit the crime. You shouldn't lose everything because you slapped someone." Brad wanted to believe him. He needed to believe someone was on his side. "Where can we meet?" "My office, downtown. I'll text you the address. Can you be here in an hour?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Brad showered for the first time in 2 days. He put on a fresh suit, though his hands trembled as he knotted his tie. He avoided looking at the family photographs that Jennifer had left behind, the smiling images of a life that no longer existed. The drive downtown was surreal. He kept the windows up, sunglasses on, cap pulled low. He half expected someone to recognize him at every stoplight, to pound on his window and scream accusations. No one did. Austin continued its Saturday morning routine, indifferent to his private apocalypse. Robert Hayes's office occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower on Congress Avenue. The reception area was sleek and modern, all chrome and leather and abstract art that probably cost more than Brad's first house. Hayes himself was exactly what Brad had hoped for, mid-50s. Silver hair, expensive suit. The kind of confident posture that came from decades of winning cases that should have been lost. Mr. Thompson. Hayes shook his hand firmly. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. Brad sat. Let me be direct with you. Hayes began. Your situation is serious, but not hopeless. The video is damaging, yes. But videos can be contextualized, narratives can be reshaped. How? First, we address the criminal charges. Aggravated assault of an elderly person sounds terrible. But the actual incident was a single slap. No weapon, no premeditation, no serious injury. A good attorney can argue this down to simple assault. Maybe even get it dismissed with anger management classes and community service. Brad leaned forward. The DA said they're recommending no bail. The DA is grandstanding for the cameras. Every prosecutor in Texas wants to be seen as tough on elder abuse. But judges care about precedent, not Twitter trends. You have no prior criminal record. You have deep ties to the community. You're not a flight risk. I can get you bail. And the civil suits Daniel Collins must be planning. Daniel Collins hasn't filed anything yet. More importantly, his mother is reportedly refusing to cooperate with prosecutors. She won't give a statement. She won't press charges personally. The DA is proceeding based on the video alone. Brad blinked. She won't cooperate. According to my sources, no. She keeps telling everyone who asks that she wants to handle this privately, that she needs to speak with you directly before any legal action proceeds. The text message from the unknown number flashed through Brad's mind. She wants to meet. Why would she protect me? Hayes shrugged. Who knows? Maybe she's a saint who genuinely believes in forgiveness. Maybe she's senile and doesn't understand what's happening. Maybe she has her own reasons that we can exploit. The point is, without the victim's cooperation, the prosecution's case is significantly weaker. Brad felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. What about my business, the frozen accounts, the canceled contracts? More manageable than you think. The bank freezes are temporary, pending investigation. If no fraud is found, they'll have to release your funds. The canceled contracts are painful, but not fatal. There are plenty of investors in Texas who don't know Margaret Collins from Adam. Once the media attention dies down, you can rebuild. Hayes pulled a document from his desk. Here's my proposal. I take your case. I get the criminal charges reduced or dismissed. I handle the civil liability. I coordinate your public rehabilitation. Within 2 years, you're back in business. Brad looked at the document. The terms were straightforward. $500,000 total. Payment plan available. Success bonuses tied to outcomes. What about the 847 people who want me destroyed? Hayes smiled. They're not an organization, Mr. Thompson. They're individuals. Individuals can be outlasted. The news cycle moves on. New scandals emerge. New villains appear. Right now, you're the most hated man in America. In 6 months, no one will remember your name. Brad wanted to believe it. He picked up the pen. Before you sign, Hayes said, I should mention one condition. What? You need to meet with Margaret Collins, privately. Let her say whatever she needs to say. Apologize. Grovel. Do whatever it takes to get her on your side. If she publicly forgives you, this whole nightmare ends overnight. She asked to meet with me through some anonymous text. Hayes nodded slowly. Then you should go. Today. Before you surrender to the courthouse tomorrow. Get her forgiveness, and I can probably get the DA to drop all charges. Brad signed the retainer agreement. He shook Hayes' hand. He left the office feeling lighter than he had in days. In the elevator, he pulled out his phone and replied to the unknown number. I'll meet her. When and where the response came immediately. St. David's Medical Center. Room 412. Tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone. Brad typed his agreement. As the elevator doors opened to the parking garage, he allowed himself to imagine a path forward. Meet Margaret, apologize, receive forgiveness, get charges dropped, rebuild business, recover family. It was possible. It was actually possible. He was so focused on this fantasy that he almost missed the small detail. Almost. As he walked to his car, something nagged at the back of his mind. Something about Robert Hayes' office. Something about the reception area. He stopped walking. He pulled up his phone and looked at the photographs he had instinctively taken of the office space, a habit from decades of real estate work. The reception desk had been empty when he arrived, which he had attributed to it being Saturday. But there had been a nameplate on the desk. He zoomed in on the photograph. The nameplate read, Emily Chen, legal assistant, Emily. The same name as the waitress who had filmed him at the diner. The same last name as Robert Chen, the divorce lawyer representing his wife. Brad's blood turned cold. He Googled Robert Hayes attorney, Austin, Texas. The search results were sparse. A basic website, a few generic reviews, no news articles, no case histories, no bar association records. He called the Texas State Bar. I'm trying to verify the license of an attorney named Robert Hayes. Keyboard clicking on the other end. I'm sorry, sir. We have no record of a Robert Hayes license to practice law in Texas. Brad stood frozen in the parking garage. The retainer agreement he had just signed was worthless. The man he had just trusted was a fraud. And tonight, he was supposed to walk alone into a hospital room to meet the woman whose network had already destroyed his business, his marriage, and his freedom. A woman who apparently knew exactly who he was. A woman who had been watching him for 45 years. His phone buzzed again. The unknown number. We know you signed the papers. Interesting choice of lawyer. Bradley, see you at 8. Brad did not go to the hospital at 8. He went at 6. 2 hours early, hoping to catch them off guard, whoever they were. He parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot. Wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, feeling like a fugitive in his own city. David's Medical Center rose against the evening sky, its windows glowing with fluorescent light. Brad had been here before, years ago, when Lily was born. He remembered pacing the waiting room, remembered the moment the nurse placed his daughter in his arms, remembered thinking that nothing could ever hurt him again, because he finally had something worth protecting. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else now. He entered through a side door, avoiding the main reception area. The hallways were quiet. That particular hospital quiet that always felt like held breath. He found the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. Room 412 was at the end of a long corridor. The door was slightly open. Brad pushed it wider and stepped inside. The room was empty. The bed was made. Pristine white sheets tucked with military precision. No flowers, no cards, no medical equipment, no Margaret Collins. A manila envelope sat on the pillow. Brad approached it slowly, as if it might explode. His name was written on the front in elegant handwriting. He opened it. Inside were documents, dozens of them, and a letter. The letter was handwritten, the same elegant script as his name on the envelope. Dear Bradley, if you're reading this, you came early. I knew you would. You were always clever, even as a little boy. I remember how you used to hide your food under your mattress at St. Michael's, saving it for later because you never knew when the next meal would come. 3 years old, and you already understood that the world was not to be trusted. I'm sorry I'm not here to meet you in person, but there are things I need you to understand before we speak face to face, and I thought it would be easier if you learned them alone. The documents in this envelope will explain everything. Read them. Then, if you still want to meet me, come to my home tomorrow night. The address is at the bottom of this letter. But Bradley, I want you to know something before you read any further. Whatever you learn in these pages, whatever anger or confusion or pain it causes you, please remember this. I have loved you since the moment I first held you. I have never stopped loving you, and I never will. Margaret Brad's hands were shaking. He sat down on the empty hospital bed and began reading the documents. The first was a copy of the adoption application from 1982. He had seen parts of this before, in his own research, but this copy had handwritten notes in the margins. Notes that had been redacted from the official files. The notes were from the caseworker. Collins family clearly bonded with child. Recommend approval despite income shortfall. Child responded positively to prospective mother. First positive response recorded in 6 months of observation. Below that, in different handwriting application denied per directive from St. Michael's board. Income requirement non-negotiable. And below that, a third note board member, Harrison, raised concerns about Collins' family's suitability. Cited unspecified personal reasons. Application denied 3-2. Brad turned to the next document. It was a letter from Margaret to the St. Michael's board. Dated April 1982, 1 month after the denial. Dear board members, I am writing to appeal your decision regarding our application to adopt Bradley Morrison. My husband and I understand that we fall slightly below your income requirements, but we believe we can provide Bradley with something more valuable than financial security, a loving home. I have attached documentation showing that my husband has been offered a promotion that will increase our income by $300 per month, effective June 1st. This would put us above your minimum threshold. I am also attaching letters of recommendation from our pastor, our neighbors, and my principal at the elementary school where I teach. Please reconsider. Bradley has already been returned by one family. He deserves stability. He deserves love. He deserves a chance. Sincerely, Margaret Collins. The next document was the board's response. Dear Mrs. Collins, thank you for your appeal. After careful consideration, the board has decided to uphold its original decision. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Regards, St. Michael's Children's Home. Brad turned to the next page. It was an internal memo from St. Michael's, dated May 1982. Collins Appeal Board member William Harrison has expressed strong opposition to the Collins application. Mr. Harrison cites concerns about Mrs. Collins's teaching methods and her involvement with what he calls radical community organizations. He believes the child would be better served by a family with more traditional values. Motion to deny appeal passed 3-2. Note, Mr. Harrison has pledged a significant donation to the new wing construction, contingent on the board's continued alignment with his recommendations. Brad stared at the memo. William Harrison. The name meant nothing to him. He turned to the next document. It was a newspaper clipping from 1985. Local businessman William Harrison announces run for state senate. The article included a photograph of Harrison, a heavy-set man in his 50s, standing at a podium, surrounded by supporters. Brad studied the face, but found no recognition. The next document was another internal memo from St. Michael's, this one from 1988. Anonymous complaint against foster family, 3 Morrison. Bradley anonymous complaint received regarding treatment of Bradley Morrison in the Patterson household. Complaint alleges physical abuse and neglect. Investigation recommended. Note complaint arrived same day as anonymous donation of $500 to St. Michael's General Fund. Unclear if related. Brad remembered the Patterson family. He remembered the belt. He remembered the closet where they locked him when he cried. He remembered the day the social worker showed up unannounced and found bruises on his back. He had always assumed someone at school had reported it. The next document was a bank record. It showed a wire transfer from an account registered to M. Collins to St. Michael's Children's Home, dated the same day as the anonymous complaint. $500. Brad's vision blurred. He blinked hard and kept reading. The next pages documented a pattern that spanned 15 years. Every time Bradley Morrison was placed with a new family, an anonymous donation arrived at St. Michael's within a week. Every time Bradley Morrison was returned, a larger donation followed. Every time Bradley Morrison was hospitalized, a complaint was filed against the responsible family. Margaret Collins had been watching him, protecting him, fighting for him for 15 years. But she had never been allowed to take him home. The final document in the stack was the one that broke him. It was a letter from Margaret to her husband James, dated 1995, the year Brad turned 18. My dearest James, today Bradley aged out of the foster system. I watched him from across the street as he walked out of his last group home with a duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked so lost, so angry, so alone. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to tell him everything. But what would I say that I tried to adopt him when he was 3 and failed? That I've watched him suffer for 15 years and couldn't stop it? That every time he was hurt, I was hurt too. He would hate me. He would think I was a coward. And maybe he would be right. So I did the only thing I could do. I set up the scholarship fund. I made sure his application would be approved. I gave him the only gift I was allowed to give a chance at a future. But it's not enough. James, it will never be enough. I failed him. The system failed him. And now he's out there alone. And all I can do is watch from the shadows and pray that somehow, someday, he finds peace. I love him. James, I know it sounds crazy. I only held him for a few hours, 45 years ago. But in those hours, he became my son, and I have grieved for him every day since. Your loving wife. Margaret. Brad dropped the letter. His chest heaved. Something was breaking inside him. Some wall he had built over decades, some fortress of anger and pride and self-sufficiency that had protected him from the knowledge that he was fundamentally alone in the world. He wasn't alone. He had never been alone. Someone had loved him from the shadows for 45 years, and he had knocked her teeth out over a pair of shoes. The door to the hospital room opened. Brad looked up, expecting Margaret, expecting Daniel, expecting someone from the network of 847. Instead, he saw Robert Hayes, the fake lawyer. Hayes was smiling, but it wasn't the confident smile from the office. It was something else. Something colder. Hello, Bradley. Who are you? Hayes closed the door behind him. My name isn't important. What's important is who sent me. Margaret. Hayes laughed. No, not Margaret. She doesn't know about me. Neither does Daniel. He pulled a chair close to the bed where Brad sat and settled into it with casual ease. I represent a different interested party. Someone who's been watching this situation develop with great interest. Brad's mind raced. The board member, Harrison, William Harrison. Hayes' smile widened. Very good. You're quicker than I expected. He's dead. He must be. That was 40 years ago. William Harrison died in 2010, but his son is very much alive. David Harrison. State Senator David Harrison, if you want to use his full title. The name clicked into place. David Harrison was a rising star in Texas politics. Conservative, wealthy, connected. There had been talk of a gubernatorial run. What does a state senator want with me? Hayes leaned forward. Senator Harrison has a problem. A very old problem that he thought was buried forever. You see, his father didn't just block the Collins adoption because of donations to St. Michael's. He blocked it because he was having an affair with one of the social workers there. And she had flagged the Collins application as a priority. He couldn't let her succeed at anything. So he sabotaged the adoption out of pure spite. Brad felt sick. That social worker eventually figured out what happened. She kept records. She was going to go public. And then she disappeared. 1986. Never found. Are you telling me? I'm telling you that if the truth about William Harrison's activities at St. Michael's ever came to light, it would destroy his son's political career. And right now, there's a 74-year-old woman who has every reason to start digging into the past. A woman who has connections to judges and journalists and investigators. A woman who just learned that the child she tried to save was systematically denied to her because of one man's petty cruelty. Hayes pulled out his phone and showed Brad a video. It was Margaret, in this very room, talking to Daniel. The same video Brad had received via text. We've been monitoring her communications. She's been researching William Harrison for the past 48 hours. She's getting close to the truth about why her adoption was really denied. Brad's voice came out hoarse. What do you want from me? Hayes smiled. We want you to destroy her. What? Not physically. We want you to destroy her credibility, her reputation, her network. Hayes pulled another document from his jacket. Sign this statement. It says that Margaret Collins approached you at the diner, not the other way around. that she deliberately provoked you, that she threatened to expose your foster care history unless you paid her money, that the slap was self-defense against a blackmail attempt. Brad stared at the document. No one will believe that. They don't have to believe it. They just have to doubt. Right now. Margaret Collins is a saint. But saints are fragile things. One credible accusation, one seed of doubt, and suddenly she's just another person with an agenda. Her network of 847 starts to wonder if they were manipulated. Her son starts to question his mother's motives. The whole edifice crumbles. And if I refuse, Hayes's smile disappeared. Then we release different information about your time at Thompson Real Estate. Financial irregularities that your chief accountant missed because she was so focused on tax fraud. Things that would add federal charges to your state charges. Things that would guarantee you spend the next 20 years in prison instead of the next 2. Brad looked at the statement. He looked at the letters from Margaret. He looked at the proof of 45 years of secret love. You want me to betray the woman who spent her whole life trying to save me. We want you to save yourself. That's what you've always done, isn't it? Bradley survived at any cost, clawed your way up from nothing, became someone. You didn't do that by being sentimental. You did it by being ruthless. Hayes stood up. You have until tomorrow morning. Sign the statement and deliver it to this address. He placed a business card on the bed. Do that, and Senator Harrison will make sure all charges against you disappear. He has friends in the DA's office, friends on the bench. Your accounts will be unfrozen. Your wife will be encouraged to reconsider the divorce. Your life will go back to normal. He walked to the door. Or refuse, and watch everything burn. Your choice, Bradley. The door closed behind him. Brad sat alone in the empty hospital room, surrounded by proof of a mother's love he had never known existed. He had 45 years of letters and records and documents that told the story of a woman who had never stopped fighting for him. And he had a statement in his hands that would destroy her. He thought about the boy he had been at 3 years old, crying in Margaret's arms, feeling safe for the first time in his life. He thought about the man he had become, standing over an old woman on a diner floor, calling her trash. He thought about his daughter Lily, who would grow up knowing what her father had done. He thought about the 2 paths in front of him, betrayal or destruction. Save himself or save the woman who had tried to save him. Brad put his head in his hands, and for the first time since he was a little boy, hiding food under his mattress, he wept. Brad drove through Austin with no destination in mind. The city lights blurred past his window like smeared paint. Reds and yellows and whites bleeding into each other through the film of tears he refused to wipe away. The statement from Harrison's man sat on the passenger seat, its white paper glowing faintly in the darkness like an accusation. He ended up at the house in Westlake Hills without meaning to, muscle memory guiding the car through familiar turns while his mind churned through impossible equations. The news vans were gone. The story had moved on to fresher outrages, leaving behind only tire tracks in the manicured grass and a few pieces of litter that the wind had scattered across the lawn. Brad sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the dark windows of his empty house. 3 days ago, he had everything. A wife who tolerated his temper because she believed it came from ambition. A daughter who looked at him like he was a hero. A business that generated millions. A reputation that opened doors. A future that stretched out before him, golden and assured. Now he sat in his car at midnight, holding a document that would let him trade one woman's destruction for his own salvation. He went inside. The house felt like a mausoleum. Jennifer had taken more than he realized. Not just clothes and jewelry, but the small things that made a house feel lived in. The photographs from the hallway, the throw pillows from the couch, Lily's drawings from the refrigerator. Brad walked through the empty rooms like a ghost haunting his own life. He found himself in Lily's bedroom. Pink walls, princess curtains, a bookshelf full of stories about brave girls who saved kingdoms and befriended dragons. On the nightstand, a framed photograph that Jennifer had left behind. Brad picked it up. The photo showed him and Lily at the Austin Zoo 3 years ago. She was sitting on his shoulders, laughing, pointing at something off camera. His face was tilted up toward her, grinning with a joy so pure it hurt to look at now. He remembered that day. He remembered buying her ice cream that dripped down her arm. He remembered carrying her to the car when she fell asleep on the drive home. He remembered thinking that he would do anything to protect her from the cruelties of the world. And now she was growing up in her grandparents' house, learning that her father was a monster who beat old women in restaurants. Brad sank onto his daughter's bed. The photograph clutched to his chest. The sobs came without warning, great heaving convulsions that shook his entire body. He cried for Lily, for the father he would never get to be again. He cried for Margaret, for the mother he never knew he had. He cried for the 3-year-old boy who had felt safe in a stranger's arms for a few brief hours before the world tore that safety away. He cried until there was nothing left. Then he lay on his daughter's small bed, curled around her pillow that still smelled faintly of her shampoo, and stared at the ceiling. The Harrison statement sat in his car. Margaret's letters sat in his pocket. 2 futures, 2 choices. One led to survival, the other led to destruction. But which was which? His phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. The message contained no words, just a video. Brad pressed play. It showed Lily. She was sitting at a table in what looked like her grandparents' kitchen, drawing with crayons. Her grandmother sat beside her, helping her color inside the lines. The video had been taken from outside the window. Someone was watching his daughter. A second text arrived. Just a reminder of what's at stake. Sign the statement by morning. Brad's blood turned to ice, then to fire. He called the number. It rang once before Hayes answered. Mr. Thompson, I hope you're not calling to negotiate. If you touch my daughter, no one is going to touch your daughter. We're not animals. Hayes's voice was calm, almost friendly. We're simply illustrating that we know where she is. We know her routine. We know which park she plays in and which school she'll attend in the fall. This is just information. Mr. Thompson, what you do with it is up to you. You're threatening an 8-year-old girl. We're offering you a choice. Sign the statement and protect everyone you love. Refuse and face the consequences. It's really very simple. Brad hung up. He sat in darkness, his mind racing through options that all led to dead ends. He could go to the police, but Harrison had friends in the department. The threat would be buried, and Brad would be the one arrested. He could go to Daniel Collins, but Daniel had no reason to believe Brad, and every reason to want him destroyed. He could sign the statement, destroy Margaret, save himself and his daughter, or he could refuse. Go to prison, Leave Lily without a father and possibly in danger from men who had already demonstrated their willingness to watch her from the shadows. There was no good choice. There was only survival or sacrifice. Brad left the house at 2 in the morning. He drove without destination again. But this time the car seemed to guide itself toward downtown Austin, toward the bridge that spanned the Colorado River, toward the place where the city's lights reflected off black water like scattered stars. Congress Avenue Bridge. He parked and walked to the center of the span. The night was warm, the air thick with humidity and the faint smell of the river below. Traffic was sparse at this hour, occasional headlights sweeping past without slowing. Brad leaned against the railing and looked down. The water was maybe 50 feet below, dark, patient, final. He thought about the math of his life. 47 years of fighting, of clawing, of building walls and burning bridges and convincing himself that he needed no one. All of it had led here, to a bridge in the middle of the night, with 2 impossible choices and a daughter he might never see again. He climbed onto the railing. The metal was cold against his palms. The wind tugged at his clothes. Below, the river waited. This was the easy way. No more choices, no more impossible equations, no more waking up to face the man he had become. Jennifer would get his life insurance. Lily would grow up believing her father died in an accident. Margaret would never have to know that the boy she loved had considered destroying her. It was neat, clean, final. Brad closed his eyes. He leaned forward. "Don't." The voice came from behind him, soft but firm. Brad's eyes snapped open. He turned, nearly losing his balance on the narrow railing. Margaret Collins stood 10 feet away. She was smaller than he remembered from the diner. Frailer somehow, without the context of tables and chairs. She wore a simple cardigan over a hospital gown, as if she had walked out of St. David's without bothering to change. Her face was still bruised, her lips still swollen, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. But she was here, on a bridge, at 2 in the morning, facing the man who had knocked her teeth out 3 days ago. "How did you find me?" Margaret took a slow step forward. "Emily has been tracking your phone since the diner. She thought you might do something like this." "Emily, the waitress. My granddaughter. Through my first scholarship recipient." Margaret took another step. "She wanted to call the police. I told her to let me come alone." Brad laughed, a harsh and broken sound. "You came alone to stop your attacker from killing himself. That's insane." "Maybe." Margaret moved closer. Close enough now that Brad could see the tears on her cheeks. "But I've waited 45 years to talk to you. Bradley, I'm not going to let you leave before I get the chance. You should want me dead. After what I did. I've never wanted you dead. Not once. Not even when you were hitting me." Brad's grip on the railing tightened. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. What I'm capable of. I know everything." Margaret's voice was steady despite the tears. "I know about the Harrison people. I know about the statement they want you to sign. I know they're threatening Lily." Brad stared at her. "How?" "Because they came to me first. 3 years ago, when Daniel's company started getting political attention. They wanted me to use my network against him. I refused. They've been looking for leverage ever since. She was close now. Close enough to touch him if she reached out. They found it when you walked into that diner. A man with no family connections, desperate for help, with a history that ties him to me. The perfect weapon. So you know, Brad said slowly, that I have a document in my car that would destroy you. That I've been considering signing it. Yes. And you still came to save me. Margaret looked up at him, her eyes meeting his, and in them Brad saw something he had never seen directed at him before. Unconditional love. I would cross any bridge to save you, Bradley. I would walk through any fire. I would face any enemy. Her voice broke. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. Brad felt the walls inside him crumbling. 47 years of armor. 47 years of convincing himself that he was better off alone. That love was weakness. That the only person he could trust was himself. All of it dissolving in the face of a 74-year-old woman who had driven herself out of a hospital bed to stand on a bridge at 2 a.m. I don't know how to be saved, he whispered. Margaret reached up and placed her hand over his. The hand that gripped the railing, the hand that was the only thing between him and the dark water below. Then let me teach you. Brad looked at the river. He looked at Margaret. He looked at the choice in front of him. Die alone in the darkness, or step down and let someone love him. The wind blew across the bridge. The water waited below. And Brad Thompson, who had spent his whole life running from the pain of abandonment, stood at the crossroads of his existence and made his choice. Brad stepped down from the railing. His legs buckled the moment his feet touched the concrete. And Margaret caught him. This frail 74-year-old woman bearing his weight as he collapsed against her. They sank to the ground together. 2 figures huddled on the cold bridge while the city slept around them. I'm sorry, Brad gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry. Margaret held him the way she had held him 45 years ago, her arms wrapped around his shaking shoulders, her cheek pressed against the top of his head. I know, sweetheart. I know. They stayed like that until Brad's tears ran dry and the first pale light of dawn began to touch the eastern sky. Then Margaret helped him to his feet, and they walked together to her car, an old Honda Civic that looked like it had seen better decades. You drove yourself here? Brad asked. From the hospital. I checked myself out. Margaret smiled weakly. The nurses weren't happy about it. Brad looked back at his own car, parked crookedly at the bridge's edge. The statement is in there. The one they want me to sign. Leave it. If I don't sign it by morning, I know what they'll do. Margaret opened the passenger door for him. Get in. We're going to my house. And then we're going to figure this out together. Brad hesitated. 47 years of instinct screamed at him to handle this alone, to trust no one, to find his own way out of the trap. But 47 years of instinct had led him to a bridge railing at 2 a.m. He got in the car. Margaret's house was a small craftsman bungalow in Travis Heights, the kind of house that had been modest in the 1970s and was now worth a fortune due to Austin's relentless growth. But nothing about it suggested wealth. The paint was faded, the garden overgrown, the porch sagging slightly on one side. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Brad stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of faces staring back at him. Young people in graduation gowns, families posed in front of new houses, children blowing out birthday candles, wedding portraits, baby announcements. My children, Margaret said softly. All 847 of them. Brad walked slowly along the wall, studying the faces. He recognized some of them from the news coverage. Michael Torres, the CEO who had canceled his deal. Patricia Webb, the federal judge. Thomas Grant Jr., the police chief. But most of them were strangers, teachers and nurses and mechanics and accountants. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. Each photograph had a small plaque beneath it, with a name and a date. The date they received their scholarship. You kept track of all of them. Every single one. Margaret moved to stand beside him. I go to their weddings when I'm invited. I send gifts when their children are born. I attend their funerals when they pass. Her voice caught. They're my family. The family I built when I couldn't have the one I wanted. Brad's eyes found a gap in the wall. A single empty frame, the glass dusty, the space behind it blank. What's that for? Margaret didn't answer immediately. She walked to the empty frame and touched it gently. That's for you. It's always been for you. Brad felt something shift in his chest. I never sent you a photograph. No. But I saved a space anyway. Just in case. She turned to face him. I have something to show you. Something I've never shown anyone. Not even Daniel. She led him down a narrow hallway to a door at the back of the house. The door was plain, unremarkable. But Margaret hesitated before opening it. This is where I've spent most of my life. Bradley. This is who I really am. She opened the door. The room beyond was small, barely larger than a closet. But every inch of wall space was covered with papers, newspaper clippings, court documents, photographs, handwritten notes on index cards connected by strings of red yarn. In the center of it all was a single name, written in large letters on a piece of cardboard. William Harrison. Brad stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the documents. You've been investigating him. For 30 years. Margaret's voice hardened. I knew something was wrong with my adoption denial. The reasons they gave didn't make sense. The caseworker who handled my application disappeared 6 months later. I started digging. She pointed to a cluster of photographs on the left wall. William Harrison was on the St. Michael's board from 1980 to 1995. During that time, 17 adoption applications were denied under suspicious circumstances. All of them involved families who had somehow crossed Harrison or his business interests. She pointed to another cluster. The caseworker who disappeared. Her name was Linda Marsh. She was 26 years old. She had evidence that Harrison was manipulating adoptions for personal gain. She was going to report him. Margaret's finger moved to a newspaper clipping. Her body was found in 2003, buried on property that Harrison sold in 1987. The case was never solved. Brad felt the weight of the room pressing down on him. You're saying Harrison murdered someone to cover up adoption fraud. I'm saying I've spent 30 years gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to use it. Margaret turned to face him. Harrison died before I could bring him down. But his son inherited everything. The money, the connections, the secrets. David Harrison, the state senator, the man who sent people to threaten your daughter. Brad's hands clenched into fists. So what do we do? We can't go to the police. Harrison owns half of them. We can't go to the press. He'll bury the story and come after us harder. Margaret smiled. It was not a kind smile. We don't go to the police or the press. Bradley, We go to my children. She pulled out her phone. 847 people. Judges, prosecutors, journalists, FBI agents, IRS investigators, corporate executives. All of them owe me everything. And all of them have been waiting 30 years for me to ask them for a favor. Brad stared at her. You've never asked? I've never needed to. Until now. Margaret began typing on her phone. Daniel wanted to use the network after you hit me. I told him no. I wanted to handle this privately, between us. But Harrison changed the game when he threatened Lily. She looked up at Brad. No one threatens my grandchildren. Brad blinked. Lily isn't. You're my son. That makes Lily my granddaughter. Margaret's eyes were fierce. And I protect my family. The sun had fully risen now, golden light streaming through the windows of Margaret's cramped investigation room. Brad looked at the evidence covering the walls, at the phone in Margaret's hand, at the determination on her bruised face. What do you need me to do? Margaret set down her phone. The statement they want you to sign. You said it's still in your car. On the bridge. Yes. Go get it. Bring it back here. Why? Margaret's smile turned sharp. Because we're going to use it. Harrison thinks he's setting a trap for me. But he's been walking into my trap for 30 years. He just doesn't know it yet. Brad drove back to the Congress Avenue Bridge. His car was still there. Untouched. The statement still sitting on the passenger seat. He grabbed it and headed back to Margaret's house, his mind churning with questions. When he arrived, the small bungalow was no longer quiet. 3 cars were parked in the driveway, through the window. Brad could see people gathered in the living room. He recognized some of them from the photographs on the wall. He walked inside. Margaret stood at the center of the room, surrounded by her children. Patricia Webb, Federal Judge Thomas Grant Jr., Chief of Police Amanda Price, the accountant who had reported Brad to the IRS, Michael Torres, the CEO, and others Brad didn't recognize. A woman in an FBI windbreaker, a man with a press badge around his neck, a young woman who looked like she might be a prosecutor. They all turned to look at Brad when he entered. The silence was heavy. Patricia Webb spoke first. So this is him, the man who hit you. This is my son, Margaret said firmly. The man who Harrison has been trying to use against me. The man who is going to help us take Harrison down. Murmurs rippled through the room. Brad held up the statement. They want me to sign this. It says Margaret approached me at the diner, that she tried to blackmail me, that I acted in self-defense. Standard discrediting playbook, the FBI woman said. Create doubt about the victim's credibility. There's more. Brad pulled out his phone and showed them the video of Lily. They're watching my daughter, threatening her if I don't cooperate. The temperature in the room dropped. Thomas Grant Jr., the police chief, stepped forward. They threatened a child. 8 years old, they have video of her at her grandparents' house. Grant's jaw tightened. That changes things. Margaret raised her hand. Everyone, listen. We have until this morning to respond to Harrison's ultimatum. But we're not going to respond the way he expects. She walked to the center of the room. For 30 years, I've gathered evidence against the Harrison family. Murder, fraud, corruption. Enough to end David Harrison's political career and put him in prison for life. She looked at each person in turn. I never asked any of you for help. I never called in favors. I let you live your lives, build your careers, raise your families. But today I'm asking, not for me, for Bradley, for his daughter, for every child that William Harrison condemned to suffering when he decided to play God with their lives. The room was silent. Then Patricia Webb spoke. "What do you need?" "Everything," Margaret said. "I need warrants, I need subpoenas, I need forensic accountants and investigative journalists and every resource you can bring to bear. I need Harrison's entire operation exposed before noon today." "That's impossible," Amanda Price said. "Even with all of us working together, we can't move that fast." Margaret smiled. "We don't have to move fast. We just have to move together." She pulled out a thick folder. "I've had 30 years to prepare. Everything is ready. The warrants are drafted. The subpoenas are written. The story is outlined. All I need is for each of you to push one button at exactly the right moment." She began handing out assignments. Patricia Webb would sign the federal warrants. Thomas Grant would coordinate local arrests. The FBI agent would execute the search. The journalist would publish the exposé. Amanda Price would testify about financial irregularities she had discovered in Harrison's accounts years ago. And Brad would deliver the statement, but not the way Harrison expected. "You want me to meet with them?" Brad said slowly, understanding dawning. "To make them think I'm cooperating. I want you to be the distraction." Margaret confirmed. "While they're focused on you, we'll be dismantling everything around them." Brad looked at the statement in his hands. "And if something goes wrong, if they realize it's a trap?" Margaret met his eyes. "Then we protect each other. That's what family does." Brad thought about his daughter. He thought about the video of her coloring at the kitchen table. He thought about the men who had watched her from the shadows. "Tell me exactly what I need to do." 2 hours later, Brad stood outside the address on Harrison's business card. It was an office building in downtown Austin, anonymous and corporate. The kind of place where dirty deals were made in clean conference rooms. The statement was in his briefcase. His phone was in his pocket, connected to a group call that let Margaret and her network hear everything. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his teeth. This was it. The moment where everything could go right or catastrophically wrong. Brad took a deep breath. He thought about the photograph of him and Lily at the zoo. He thought about the empty frame on Margaret's wall. He thought about the woman who had loved him for 45 years without ever asking for anything in return. He pushed open the door and walked inside. The elevator climbed to the 14th floor with agonizing slowness. Brad watched the numbers tick upward, his reflection ghostly in the polished steel doors. He looked like a man who had not slept in 3 days. Which was accurate. He looked like a man walking to his own execution, which might also be accurate. The phone in his pocket was warm against his thigh, the open line connecting him to Margaret and the others. He could hear nothing from their end, but he knew they were listening. Patricia Webb in her chambers, pen poised over federal warrants, Thomas Grant in his office, officers standing by. The FBI agent in a surveillance van 3 blocks away. The journalist with his finger on the publish button. All of them waiting for Brad to play his part. The elevator doors opened. The reception area was exactly what Brad expected from Harrison's operation. Expensive art on the walls, leather furniture, a receptionist who looked like she had been hired from a modeling agency. Everything designed to project power and legitimacy. Mr. Thompson. The receptionist smiled without warmth. They're expecting you. Conference room at the end of the hall. Brad walked. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, each step carrying him deeper into enemy territory. He passed closed doors with frosted glass, shadows moving behind them like ghosts. The conference room door was open. Robert Hayes sat at the head of a long table, the fake lawyer who had first approached Brad with promises of salvation. Beside him sat a man Brad recognized from campaign posters, David Harrison himself, state senator, heir to a murdered woman's secrets, the man who had ordered surveillance on an 8-year-old girl. Harrison was younger than Brad expected, mid-40s, with the kind of polished good looks that played well on camera. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars and a smile that never reached his eyes. Mr. Thompson. Harrison gestured to an empty chair. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Brad sat. He placed his briefcase on the table but did not open it. You have something for us? Hayes asked. I have questions first. Harrison's smile flickered. I don't think you're in a position to ask questions, Mr. Thompson. I'm in a position to walk out of here without signing anything. Brad kept his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. You need me. You need my signature on that statement. Otherwise, you have nothing. Harrison and Hayes exchanged glances. What do you want to know? Harrison asked. I want to know why. Not the political reasons, not the strategic calculations. I want to know why your father blocked my adoption 45 years ago. Silence. Harrison's expression shifted, the politician's mask slipping slightly to reveal something colder beneath. You've been doing research. Margaret Collins has been doing research for 30 years. I've just been catching up. Harrison leaned back in his chair. My father was a complicated man. He believed in order, in hierarchy, in making sure the right people ended up in the right places. He believed in playing God with children's lives. He believed in protecting his interests. Harrison's voice hardened. Margaret Collins was a troublemaker. She asked too many questions. She pushed too hard for changes in the foster system that would have exposed certain irregularities. My father simply ensured that she didn't gain the platform she needed to cause problems. By denying her the child she wanted to adopt. By removing a potential threat. You were incidental. Mr. Thompson. Collateral damage in a larger game. Brad felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down. Not yet. And the caseworker, Linda Marsh. Harrison's smile vanished entirely. I think we're done with questions. She found out what your father was doing. She was going to expose him. So he killed her. That's a serious accusation. Her body was found on property your father sold in 1987. That's not an accusation. That's evidence. Harrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You came here to sign a statement, Mr. Thompson, not to interrogate me. Either produce the document or leave. Brad opened his briefcase slowly. He pulled out the statement. He laid it on the table between them. Before I sign this, I want one more thing. You're not in a position to negotiate. I want you to call off the surveillance on my daughter. Right now, while I watch. Harrison stared at him. How do I know you'll actually sign once I do? Because unlike you, I don't have any other options. Brad met his gaze. Call off your dogs, And I'll destroy the woman who's been trying to take down your family for 3 decades. That seems like a fair trade. Harrison considered this for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. Stand down on the Austin surveillance. Effective immediately. He ended the call. Satisfied. Brad felt a small measure of relief, but he knew it was temporary. Harrison could reinstate the surveillance with another phone call. The only real protection was to end this permanently. He picked up the pen. He held it over the signature line. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The signal. Actually, Brad said, setting down the pen. I've changed my mind. Harrison's face contorted with rage. What? I'm not going to sign this. I'm not going to destroy Margaret Collins, and I'm not going to help you cover up your father's crimes. Hayes moved toward the door, blocking the exit. I don't think you understand your situation. Mr. Thompson. I understand it perfectly. Brad stood, reaching for his phone. You made one mistake, Senator. You assumed I was alone. He pulled out his phone and held it up. Say hello to Federal Judge Patricia Webb, Police Chief Thomas Grant, FBI Special Agent Diana Morrison, and about 30 other people who have been listening to every word you've said for the past 10 minutes. Harrison's face went white. That's inadmissible. You recorded a private conversation without consent. In Texas, only one party needs to consent to recording. Brad smiled grimly. I consent. Harrison lunged for the phone. Brad dodged, putting the conference table between them. Your admission about Linda Marsh's death is currently being transmitted to the FBI. Your financial records are being subpoenaed as we speak. And in about 30 seconds, a story is going live on every major news site in the country, detailing your father's crimes and your attempts to cover them up. Harrison turned to Hayes. Stop the transmission. Now. Hayes pulled out a signal jammer, a small black device that he slammed onto the table. The phone in Brad's hand went dead. You think we weren't prepared for this? Harrison's composure had cracked completely, revealing the desperate man beneath. You think we've survived 30 years of Margaret Collins' investigation by being careless? He advanced on Brad, his eyes wild. You've just signed your own death warrant, Thompson, and your daughter's. The signal was already transmitted. Your threats don't matter anymore. Do they? Harrison smiled, and it was the worst smile Brad had ever seen. Check again. He pulled out his own phone. The jammer activated the moment you walked into this building. Your little network heard nothing, recorded nothing. They're sitting in their offices right now, wondering why you've gone silent. Brad's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I was connected the entire elevator ride. The elevator is the one dead zone we allow. Gives our guests a false sense of security. Harrison's smile widened. By the time you realized the jammer was active, you'd already confessed your entire plan. Thank you for that, by the way. Now we know exactly who to target. Hayes moved closer, cutting off Brad's path around the table. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Thompson, you're going to sign that statement. Then you're going to call Margaret Collins and tell her that you've had a change of heart, that you've realized she manipulated you, that you want nothing to do with her network of do-gooders. And if I refuse? Harrison nodded to Hayes. Hayes pulled out a gun. Then we'll explain to the police that you broke into our offices, that you attacked us, that we had no choice but to defend ourselves. Harrison shrugged. You're already the most hated man in America. No one will question it. Brad stared at the gun. He thought about Lily. He thought about Margaret waiting by the phone. He thought about all the people who had trusted him to play his part. You're going to kill me either way. Probably. Harrison picked up the statement and the pen. But if you sign, we'll make sure Lily is taken care of. A trust fund, good schools, everything she needs. Managed by you. Managed by people who understand the importance of order. Harrison held out the pen. It's not a bad deal, Thompson. Better than your daughter growing up as an orphan. Brad looked at the pen. He looked at the gun. He looked at the window behind Harrison's head, 14 floors above the street, and he made a decision. No. Harrison sighed. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Hayes, make it look convincing. Hayes raised the gun. Brad dove, not toward the door, not toward Hayes, toward the window. He grabbed a chair as he moved, swinging it with all his strength at the floor-to-ceiling glass. The window shattered. Wind roared into the conference room, scattering papers, sending everything not bolted down, flying into chaos. Brad grabbed the window frame and looked down. 14 floors. The street below was a dizzying swirl of cars and pedestrians, people going about their Saturday morning with no idea what was happening above them. Hayes was shouting something, but the wind stole his words. Brad saw the gun rising. He saw Harrison's face twisted with rage. He saw the ledge outside the window, maybe 8 inches wide, running along the building's facade. He stepped out onto it. The wind hit him like a fist, trying to tear him from the building. His fingers found a grip on the window frame. His feet balanced on the narrow concrete ledge. Hayes appeared at the broken window. Gun pointed at Brad's head. Get back inside. Thompson, now. Shoot me, and you lose everything. Brad's voice came out steadier than he felt. A murder in your own office, with witnesses on the street, your political career is over either way. Hayes hesitated. Below. Someone screamed. A woman on the sidewalk had looked up and seen a man standing on a ledge 14 stories above the ground. Within seconds, phones were rising, cameras were filming, the crowd was growing. He's got witnesses now. Brad smiled grimly. Hundreds of them, all recording. Harrison pushed past Hayes to the window. Get back inside, and we can still make a deal. There's no deal. Brad began edging along the ledge, away from the window. There's only the truth, and it's about to come out. His foot slipped. For one terrible moment, he felt gravity take hold. Felt his body tilting toward the abyss. His fingers scraped against concrete. Found a handhold, held. He pressed himself against the building, breathing hard. The ledge continued for another 20 feet before reaching another window. If he could get there, he might find an office, a way back inside, a chance to escape. Behind him, he heard Harrison screaming at Hayes. He heard sirens in the distance. He heard the crowd below growing louder. He heard his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Brad Thompson began to move, inch by inch, along a ledge 8 inches wide, 14 floors above the ground, with a killer behind him and an uncertain future ahead. And somewhere in the city, Margaret Collins was praying for the son she had loved for 45 years to survive long enough to come home. Brad's fingers found a crack in the concrete and held. The wind screamed around him, trying to tear him from the building face. Below, the crowd had swelled to hundreds, their upturned faces like pale dots against the dark asphalt. He could hear sirens now. multiple vehicles converging on the building from different directions. He inched forward, 8 feet to the next window. 7. 6. Behind him. Harrison was still shouting, his words stolen by the wind. Brad did not look back. Looking back meant losing focus, and losing focus meant falling. 5 feet. 4. His right foot found a gap where the concrete had crumbled away. He shifted his weight, searching for solid ground. And for one horrible moment, there was nothing beneath him but air. Then his toe caught the edge. He pressed forward. 3 feet. 2. The window was closed, but he could see through it into an empty office. A desk, a chair, a door that led to safety. 1 foot. Brad drew back his elbow and drove it into the glass. The window cracked, but did not break. He hit it again. This time it shattered, fragments cascading inward, and Brad threw himself through the opening, landing hard on the carpeted floor amid a shower of broken glass. He lay there for a moment, breathing, bleeding from a dozen small cuts. Alive. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway. Brad scrambled to his feet and ran for the door. He burst into the corridor just as Hayes rounded the corner from the stairwell, gun still in hand. "Stop!" Brad did not stop. He sprinted toward the elevator bank, punched the down button, and dove through the doors just as they opened, slamming the lobby button with his palm. The doors closed on Hayes' furious face. Brad slumped against the elevator wall, chest heaving. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel, a wild-eyed man covered in blood and broken glass. The elevator descended. 12 floors, 10, 8. At the 6th floor, it stopped. The doors opened. 2 police officers stood in the hallway, hands on their weapons. Brad Thompson. Brad raised his hand slowly. "That's me." "Sir, we need you to come with us." Brad stepped out of the elevator. There are 2 men on the 14th floor. Robert Hayes and David Harrison. Hayes has a gun. They tried to kill me. They're responsible for covering up a murder from 1986, a woman named Linda Marsh. The officers exchanged glances. "Sir, we're here because of the crowd outside. Someone reported a man on a ledge." "That was me. I was trying to escape." Brad's words came out in a rush. "Listen to me. Senator Harrison admitted to knowledge of his father's involvement in Linda Marsh's death. I was transmitting the conversation to Federal Judge Patricia Webb, but they had a signal jammer. You need to get up there before they destroy evidence." One officer reached for his radio. Before he could speak, the stairwell door burst open. Hayes emerged, gun raised. Everything happened in seconds. The officers drew their weapons, shouting commands. Hayes saw the uniforms and hesitated, his gun wavering between Brad and the police. Someone screamed from down the hallway. Hayes made his choice. He turned the gun toward Brad. 2 shots rang out. Neither came from Hayes. The man crumpled to the ground, his weapon clattering across the tile floor. The officers rushed forward, kicking the gun away, checking for a pulse. "He's alive," one officer said. "Shoulder wound. We need medical." Brad leaned against the wall, his legs giving out. He slid to the floor as more officers poured into the corridor, as paramedics arrived with stretchers, as the building transformed into a crime scene. Through the chaos, he heard a familiar voice. "Bradley." Margaret pushed through the crowd of officers, her small frame somehow commanding enough presence that they parted for her. Behind her came Daniel Collins, Patricia Webb, Thomas Grant, and a dozen others. Margaret fell to her knees beside Brad, her hands touching his face, checking his wounds. "You're alive. Thank God, you're alive." The signal was jammed. Brad's voice came out hoarse. They didn't hear anything. "We heard enough." Patricia Webb stepped forward, her judicial authority evident even in civilian clothes. "The jammer blocked your transmission inside the building, but we had backup. Emily planted a secondary transmitter in your briefcase. It bounced the signal through the building's own security system." Brad stared at her. "You recorded everything, every word." Thomas Grant Jr. held up his phone. "Including Harrison's admission about Linda Marsh. We have federal agents heading to his office right now." As if on cue, the elevator doors opened and a team of FBI agents emerged, led by Special Agent Diana Morrison. They moved with purpose toward the stairs, armed with warrants that Patricia Webb had signed 30 minutes ago. Margaret helped Brad to his feet. "It's over," she said softly. "It's finally over." The next few hours blurred together. Brad gave his statement to police, then to FBI agents, then to more police. He was treated for his cuts at the scene, then transported to St. David's Medical Center for a more thorough examination. Margaret stayed with him through all of it. At some point, he fell asleep in the hospital bed, and when he woke, the television in his room was showing breaking news. State Senator David Harrison arrested on conspiracy and obstruction charges. The news anchor's voice filled the room. In a stunning development, Texas State Senator David Harrison was taken into custody this afternoon in connection with a decades-old cold case. Federal authorities allege that Harrison and his late father, William Harrison, conspired to cover up the 1986 murder of Linda Marsh, a social worker who was investigating irregularities at a local children's home. The screen showed Harrison being led from his office building in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury. The arrest comes after a dramatic confrontation at Harrison's downtown office, where local businessman Brad Thompson allegedly uncovered evidence of the cover-up. Thompson, who made headlines last week after a viral video showed him striking an elderly woman, has reportedly been cooperating with federal investigators. Brad reached for the remote and muted the television. Margaret sat in the chair beside his bed, watching him. "How do you feel?" "Like I fell off a building." Brad tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "Which I almost did. The doctors say you'll be fine. Some cuts, some bruises, nothing permanent." Brad looked at his hands, bandaged and sore. Harrison's people were watching Lily. They had video of her at her grandparents' house. "I know. Thomas sent officers to the house this morning, as soon as we realized the transmission was blocked. Lily is safe. Jennifer knows everything that happened." "Does she hate me?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "She's confused, angry, scared." She paused, but she watched the news coverage. "She saw you risk your life to expose Harrison. She saw you choose to do the right thing even when doing the wrong thing would have been easier. That doesn't erase what I did to you." "No." Margaret reached out and took his hand. "But it's a start." The door opened. Daniel Collins entered, his expression unreadable. He stood at the foot of Brad's bed, studying the man who had struck his mother, the man who had nearly died trying to protect her. "The FBI found Harrison's records," Daniel said. "All of them. 30 years of evidence that he and his father manipulated the foster care system for political gain. Dozens of children who were deliberately placed with abusive families because their birth parents had crossed the Harrisons somehow." Brad closed his eyes. I was one of them. You were the first. Daniel's voice softened slightly. William Harrison specifically targeted your adoption because he wanted to punish my mother for her advocacy work. Every family that took you in afterward was either paid by Harrison or blackmailed into returning you. They manufactured my suffering. They manufactured a lot of suffering. But thanks to you, they're finally being held accountable. Brad opened his eyes. I don't deserve thanks. I started this whole thing by hitting your mother. Yes, you did. Daniel moved closer. And if you'd asked me 3 days ago, I would have said you deserved everything that was happening to you. Prison, financial ruin, losing your family. All of it. What about now? Daniel looked at Margaret, then back at Brad. Now I think maybe people are more complicated than their worst moments. Maybe a man who would assault an old woman can also be a man who would risk his life to protect her. Maybe both things can be true at once. He extended his hand. I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm saying I'm willing to see what happens next. Brad took his hand. The grip was firm, neither warm nor cold. An acknowledgement rather than an embrace. A beginning rather than a conclusion. Thank you. Daniel nodded and left the room. Margaret squeezed Brad's hand. That was hard for him. He's protective of me. He should be. I'm a stranger who hurt you. You're not a stranger. Margaret's eyes glistened. You've never been a stranger. Bradley, you've been my son since the moment I held you 45 years ago. Brad felt tears threatening. I don't know how to be someone's son. I never learned. Then we'll learn together. Margaret smiled through her own tears. We have time now. All the time in the world. 1 week later, Brad stood in front of a judge. The courtroom was packed with reporters, but also with faces Brad recognized from Margaret's wall. Her children had come to bear witness. Not for him exactly, but for her. For the woman who had spent 40 years building a family out of strangers. The prosecutor presented the charges, aggravated assault of an elderly person. Brad pleaded guilty. His lawyer, a real one this time, arranged through Daniel's connections, presented mitigating circumstances. Brad's cooperation with federal investigators, his role in exposing the Harrison conspiracy, letters of support from unexpected sources. The judge listened to everything. Then she looked at Brad. Mr. Thompson, you committed a serious crime. You assaulted a defenseless woman in public, causing her physical harm and emotional distress. Under normal circumstances, I would sentence you to significant prison time. Brad's heart sank. However, the judge paused. The victim in this case, Margaret Collins, has submitted a statement asking for leniency. She has also agreed to participate in a restorative justice program with you. Given these factors, and your cooperation with federal authorities, I am sentencing you to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service at the Collins Senior Center, and mandatory anger management counseling. Brad exhaled. Additionally, you are ordered to make a public apology to Mrs. Collins and to participate in her victim offender mediation program for the full duration of your probation. Yes, Your Honor. The judge's expression softened slightly. Mr. Thompson, I've been on this bench for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people stand where you're standing. Most of them are looking for a way out. You're the first one I've seen who seems to be looking for a way in. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Brad turned to find Margaret in the gallery. She was smiling. 3 months passed. Brad sold his remaining properties and paid off his debts. He settled his divorce with Jennifer, giving her everything she asked for and more. He established a trust fund for Lily, managed by an independent firm with no connection to him. He started his community service at the Collins Senior Center. The first day was hard. The residents knew who he was. They had seen the video. They looked at him with suspicion, with fear, with contempt. Brad accepted it all. He pushed wheelchairs. He read books to people who could no longer see. He fed residents who could no longer feed themselves. He cleaned rooms and changed sheets and did every task he was assigned without complaint. Slowly, the suspicion faded. The residents began to see him not as the monster from the video, but as the man who showed up every day, who learned their names, who listened to their stories. One afternoon, an elderly veteran named Walter called Brad to his bedside. "You're the one who hit Margaret," Walter said. "Yes, sir. And now you're here, emptying bedpans and pushing wheelchairs." "Yes, sir." Walter studied him for a long moment. "My father used to hit my mother. I swore I'd never be like him. Then one day, I came home from Vietnam with a head full of nightmares, and I raised my hand to my wife." The old man's eyes were distant. "I never actually hit her, but I saw the fear in her eyes, and I knew I had become everything I hated." Brad waited. "It took me 30 years to forgive myself." Walter continued. 30 years of therapy and apologies and trying to be better. Some days I still don't think I deserve forgiveness." "What changed?" "Nothing changed. I just decided that hating myself wasn't helping anyone. The only thing that helps is showing up, day after day, and trying to be the man I want to be instead of the man I was." Walter reached out and gripped Brad's hand with surprising strength. "You showed up. That's the first step. Don't stop." Brad nodded, unable to speak. That evening, he visited Margaret at her house. She had recovered fully from her injuries, the bruises faded, the stitches removed. But she had kept the photographs on her wall, the evidence of 40 years of love given freely to strangers. Brad looked at the empty frame. "I brought you something." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a photograph. It showed a 3-year-old boy with blue eyes, sitting in a social worker's office, clutching a worn teddy bear. The photograph was faded, creased, clearly very old. "Where did you get this?" "The FBI found it in Harrison's records. He kept souvenirs of the children he'd manipulated." Brad's voice was quiet. There was a note attached. It said, "Collins boy. Phase 1 complete." Margaret touched the photograph gently. "You were so small. I don't remember much from that time, but I remember being held. I remember feeling safe." Brad looked at her. "I think that memory is why I survived everything that came after. Somewhere inside me, I knew that feeling was possible. I just forgot how to find it." Margaret took down the empty frame. She placed the photograph inside. She hung it back on the wall, in the space that had waited 45 years to be filled. "Welcome home, Bradley." Brad looked at the wall of faces. 848 now, all of them connected by a single thread. All of them loved by a single extraordinary woman. "Thank you," he said, "for never giving up on me." Margaret took his hand. "Thank you for giving me the chance to finally be your mother." Outside, the sun was setting over Austin, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the city, David Harrison sat in a federal detention center, awaiting trial. Somewhere, Jennifer was explaining to Lily that her father had made terrible mistakes, but was trying to become a better man. Somewhere, 847 people were going about their lives, unaware of how one woman's love had shaped their destinies. And in a small house in Travis Heights, a 74-year-old woman and the son she had loved for 45 years stood together, looking at a wall of photographs, finally united after decades of separation. The journey was not over. There would be more apologies, more counseling, more difficult conversations. There would be days when Brad hated himself and days when he doubted he could change. There would be setbacks and struggles and moments of despair. But there would also be this, a mother's hand in his, a place where he belonged, a family that had waited 45 years for him to come home, 2 years after the slap heard around the world. Brad Thompson stood at the grand opening of Margaret's house, the senior center expansion funded by donations from all 848 of Margaret's children. He was no longer the man who had struck an elderly woman over a pair of expensive shoes. He was no longer the orphan who believed love was weakness and kindness was for fools. He was simply a son who had finally come home. Margaret Collins taught us that family is not defined by blood, but by choice. That love given freely, without expectation of return, creates ripples that span generations. That the measure of a life is not wealth or power, but the number of hearts you have touched along the way. She also taught us that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to believe that people can change, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Brad's transformation began with a single step down from a bridge railing. It continued with thousands of small steps afterward, each one a choice to be better than he was yesterday. Now I ask you, have you ever witnessed someone being publicly humiliated or mistreated, and found yourself frozen, unsure whether to intervene? What would you do differently today?